All right, in this example, we are going to talk about another JavaFX control, the button. So a button, right, is a button. It's a simple button control, right? The user is going to click on it. When the user clicks on that, it's going to trigger an event in your application, and then your application is going to respond to the event that's generated when the user clicks a button. Okay. So buttons, like labels that we talked about before, can contain texts and images. There are three constructors for button that we'll talk about. All of these are very similar to the label constructors as well. So when you use the default constructor, the constructor with no parameters, that'll create an empty button. You can put some text on the button by calling this constructor here, and then you can actually put a text and an image on the button as well. Like I mentioned before, right, the primary purpose of a button is to produce an action when it is clicked. So when the user clicks on that button, it's going to generate an object called an action event object. All right, and so basically what's going to happen is that the program, the application, is going to sit there and watch for action events to be generated. Okay, and that action event is going to trigger some other process. So when an action event is generated, you're going to have what's called an event handler, right? And that event handler is going to respond to, to whatever action corresponds to the user clicking the button. Okay. So, for instance, you have some kind of form or something like that. The user is going to fill out the form, and then they're going to click on the submit button. Right. That submit button is going to generate an action event, and then some event handler is going to take care of that event, what they're supposed to. So if it's the case of a form, then probably that's going to save the user's information to a database or something like that. Okay. That type of programming is called event-driven programming, right? And that's basically the primary programming paradigm for GUI programming, right? So the application is basically like sitting there and reacting to things that the user does. Okay. All right, so in this, since we're just talking about the components and buttons, we're just going through on a really basic level. We're just talking about how to create buttons and how to get them into your scenes. We're not going to talk about how to handle the events until later. Okay, all right, but we will do that. All right, let's take a look at the button example. So the button example is a lot like the label example that we created earlier. Same. I did think I even used a lot of the same code. Number one on the imports, these four right here: application, scene, stage, and then whatever your root component is going to be. In this case, it's a pane. Those are going to be in there no matter what, right? If you have a button, then you're also going to have to do import javafx.scene.control.button or a control.asterisk. You can import them all, but I just want you to see specifically which imports that you'll need here. Again, these imports are just for looks mainly, and because a lot of people are interested in styling their application how they want to, and that's again a good idea, especially if you're into that sort of thing. I'm less of how things look than their function type of person. So I'm not huge on that. It is a huge. I'm not trying to undersell that aspect of software design and development, because it is huge, right? If users feel more comfortable using a program and it looks better, then and it's easier for them to use, they're kind of naturally going to gravitate towards that setup. All other things being equal, so it is important. I'm just not. It's just not my forte. Okay. So in the button example, then again, we have our start method, right? Like always in these JavaFX applications, I create the root object, the root container, and that's going to be, again, a pane. It could be lots of other things: border pane, anchor pane, many other things that it could be. All right, so it's just using this as an example. All right, and then I'm creating the buttons in here. All right, so I create a bunch of buttons. And then just like in the label example, I add those buttons to the root container, component to root container. Then I create a scene, right? And I pass that root container to the scene. Set the title of the stage. Set the stage to show the scene I just created up here, and then show the stage. So when I run this one, you will get a stage with a bunch of buttons on them. You can click on those buttons, and you'll see, like on this button number 1, how it looks very nice, right? When I click it, you can see I didn't really have to do a lot to get the button to react to the mouse, right? When I hover over it, you can see that it changes color a little bit. That kind of signifies to the user, hey, you can click on this, right? And then when I click on it, you can see it changes again. When I let go, right, it changes. All right, so all that code you kind of get for free in there, which is nice, okay? You can see all I did here was create, for button number 1, create a button. I changed the font and relocated it because we were using Paint again, okay? So all that stuff, again, is particular to Paint, right? You aren't going to be able to relocate it as easily as this in some other of the containers that we use, okay? Now you might say, hey, when I click on this, nothing happens, right? On these two, that is basically my fault for not doing that. You can see you probably would not want a button to react like that. The reason why it's not doing that is because I changed the text color and did some other weird things to button number 3 and number 4. Right? I set some styles to it and changed the padding, and that sort of interferes with that default behavior of a button, right? That it should change when you mouse over, and do that as well. Okay. So for some reason I did that on 3 and 4, which is irritating. So there's a reason why that's so. I looked into it, but it's been a while, and at that time I couldn't really resolve it in a satisfactory way. It might be fixed now in the later versions of JavaFX as well, and it could be just my ineptitude for with making things look nice, but keeping them functional as well. So anyway, that's why these things don't blink, because I've kind of messed them up by applying these styles, and I haven't been able to fix it. You can see the one with the image though works. Okay, so you can see when I click on that one, everything looks fine. All right, so here again, all of this code is just for creating the buttons and styling them. They have to actually be added to the root component or some other container in the root component. And I do that exactly. This is for Paint, also for some other, also many other components or containers. You can add components to it this way with root.getChildren.add to add one, .addAll to add several components. All right, and that is about it for this. For right now, our buttons aren't going to do much. You can click on them, but nothing will happen. We have to get to the part about how do we handle events based on action events that are generated by these buttons. So that's for a later discussion.